I love building P40s. I don't know why, I just really like the aircraft, and I find them to be one of the most enjoyable subjects when I build them. And I think it's probably time to branch out and try a P40 from another company. Hello everyone, I'm Matt, this is Model Minutes, and join me on the workbench as I experience, for the first time, a P40B/C Warhawk from Trumpeter. So join me as I get this one down onto the workbench and complete a build and review. For a more detailed look inside the box, check out the dedicated unboxing video I've already made on this particular subject. In this video, I'll be focusing on what this kit is like to build and rounding off with a review on the end. I'll put a list of the products I used on the screen now to give you an idea of the kind of things you might want to go and get if you fancy having a go at this one for yourself. As is quite normal, I'll be cutting the parts away from the sprue using my cutters and cleaning up any rough areas with a sanding stick or removing any flash with a sharp knife. This is not a particularly old tooling and the level of flash is actually quite low. Tamiya extra thin cement will be my cement of choice throughout this build. And as you can probably imagine, I'm going to start by assembling the cockpit details. There are quite a few parts that build up the cockpit, and the design is relatively intelligent. It can be a little bit fiddly in places, but generally this builds up into a rather nice looking cockpit area. The only thing probably worth noting is that this does not come with a pilot figure, so unless you can find one or have one in the spares box, this model will be destined to be uncrewed. With the cockpit assembly now built, it was added onto its mounting points inside of the fuselage. The tail wheel was then glued into its position at the back of the model. I thinned down some Japanese Army green with some Tamiya X20A acrylic thinner. This was then hand painted inside of the cockpit areas. This is going to represent my interior green. A few thin coats would be carefully applied just to make sure I got a good level of opacity. When that was done, some Humbrol 110, which is a natural wood colour, was used to pick out the headrest for the pilot. Vallejo black would be used to paint the control panel and some other small details. There is a decal for the control panel, but I found that the decal film was a little bit thick around the edges, so I trimmed some of that away before this was then ready to be added onto the model. At this point I'm going to use Humbrol Decal Fix to apply the decal, and having soaked the decal to allow it to separate from the backing paper, I would use the decal fix to help apply it onto the control panel. Hopefully this decal fix will soften it into the plastic details and help it stick to the surface. When that was done, the two fuselage halves were joined together. The fit is generally quite good. The upper engine cowling component can then be added, and I did have to take care to get this as flush as possible. The same goes for the lower air intake component. There is also a blanking plate which needs to go on the front of the nose. I did spend a little bit of time paying attention to the seams and clean them up with a sanding stick. Now I'm going to move on to the wings. The upper and the lower wing surfaces need to be joined together, and once again the fit is generally quite good. When that was done, I joined the wing surfaces onto the fuselage. I did have to be careful to make sure that there was no gap at the wing roots. The radiator cowling flap can then be added. Unfortunately, it only has the one option, which is in the closed position. I then added on the tail surfaces at the rear of the aircraft. The landing gear bay doors can then be added into their relevant positions, and I moved on to assemble the propeller components. This was relatively simple. It is worth noting that technically This does have a freely rotating prop, but it is kind of just press fitted onto the nose, so it may fall off if you handle it a bit carelessly. The hubs for the wheels need to be added inside of the tyres. Because I thought it might be easier, I added the landing gear legs into their holes on the bottom of the model. I will add the wheels later after painting. Before I can do any painting though, I actually want to add some canopy masks. I've got the KV models set for this particular kit, and they were peeled from the backing sheet and added onto the clear parts as appropriate. The only thing I noticed with this particular mask set is that the masks for the front window don't really make sense. It is my understanding that the version I'm replicating had a kind of one-piece windscreen, and in this particular mask set they come in 3 pieces and don't seem to fit quite right. So with that in mind, I did have to do my own masking for this particular component. Humbrol Clearfix will be used to glue on these clear parts. It can be a little bit stringy, so I had to take care to not make a mess with this glue. But once it was applied, the clear parts would be added into position. I added the front windscreen first, and then the rear windows on the side of the fuselage. The final part to be added is the main canopy. I think you could technically position this open, but it might need a little bit of modification to do that. And now it's time to prime. And because it was such a nice day, I decided to do this outside. I'm going to prime this kit with Tamiya Fine Surface Primer in grey. The whole kit and all of the parts still remaining to be added were given a few light coats of this to help ensure any subsequent layers of paint stick to the plastic. When that was dry, I got out this Outlaw Yellow. This is a airbrush ready lacquer paint. This was airbrushed onto the leading edges of the wings, as there will be some yellow warning panels here which I will have to mask. Next, this medium sea grey from Hataka was loaded into the airbrush and was sprayed onto the lower surfaces of the model. Because I'm a little bit lazy, I've decided that I'm going to use this camouflage mask set. This is the offering from AML, and I think it kind of matches the one I want to do, but it might not be 100% correct for the specific paint scheme included in my kit, but I think it'll do. These vinyl masks are fairly simple to use and are peeled from their backing paper and added onto the model in the right place. I do find in some places they don't quite conform to the details or shape of the model, so I just have to take care with that, and maybe a little extra tape could help. But generally I've used this kind of product a couple of times now, and it does make the painting process a little bit quicker. It's almost like the hard work has already been done for you. With the lower side masked, I moved on to use this Hataka dark green. The reason I'm going for dark green is because if I don't technically have the right masks for the light grey. It's a little bit backwards how AML have designed their masking sheets, and they want you to mask the dark colour and not the light. So we'll see how this goes. Having applied the dark green, the remaining masks were added to the top surfaces, and then Hataka Ocean Grey was used to complete the camouflage scheme. Fortunately, this paint can build up quite a good level of opacity, so the fact that I was spraying on a darker colour wasn't really a problem. When that was done, I would leave it to dry, and then I would carefully remove the mask sheets. As a top tip, if you keep your mask sheets and put them back on the backing paper, you might be able to get another use out of them on another kit in the future. Hataka Sky Type S is going to make an appearance here, and this was sprayed onto the spinner for the propeller. Vallejo Black would then be hand painted onto the propeller blades. You can see that I've already done the tips in yellow. That would have been the Outlaw Yellow which I used earlier, and they have been masked. Whilst I've got the black paint out, I'll also use it on the tyres of the wheels. And then the green colour I used in the cockpit makes a reappearance. This was carefully hand painted into the wheel wells. Vallejo Silver can be used to carefully paint the landing gear legs. I would also use this on the pitot tube on the wing. Now I can turn my attention to the decals. I've already used the cockpit control panel, and I'm going to use the RAF ones in this, but you do actually get 2 other paint schemes as well, and you have full decals for those, so I will be saving them for a future project. The only thing I want to point out on these decals is that there is a bit of a misprint here. As you can see, it says on lift and on step. It should actually say no lift and no step, so there is a bit of a typo. Relatively easy to fix, I imagine, just by simply reversing them, but I decided I would just omit them. I omit them partly because I can't be bothered to fix the problem, but also because it doesn't actually tell you in the instructions where they should go. The decals I am using though are going to be dipped in some warm water to help release them from the backing paper. I did find that these ones took a little bit longer than some other transfers I've used from other companies. And on a related note, if you'd like to get your hands on a brushwater mug, check out my merch store. You'll be helping support the channel. Don't drink it. Microscale set and sol will be my decal setting solutions in this project. First up, from the blue bottle, microset is added onto the relevant areas of the kit. The decals were then slid off of the backing paper, carefully positioned, and then I would use some microsol from the red bottle to soften them into the surface details. The decal application was generally quite straightforward. They were a little bit thick and a little bit papery, but on the whole they were completely acceptable and usable. Perhaps the printing is a little bit vibrant, and they could be a little bit more muted, but with some care you can apply them quite well. There was only one decal I think that I had a little bit of tearing in, but with a little bit of patience you can kind of fix that problem. You might have noticed as well that I didn't actually gloss coat this kit before I added the decals, and the reason for that is because I think that the paint I've applied is already really smooth, and I'm hoping that I won't have any silvering. I did have to make sure not to forget to add the little decals onto the propeller blades as well. But once all of those decals were applied, I did actually go and add a gloss coat. This Outlaw Paints Lacquer Gloss will help protect these decals in the next stages of the build. This Humbrol blue-grey enamel wash was thinned down with some white spirit. I just think it's too much if you get it straight out of the bottle, and I want a much more subtle effect. This was then brushed over the entire aircraft and allowed to run into all of the recessed details and panel lines. Once that was done, I went back over the top of the model with this K-Colors semi-matte varnish. I want to dull down the shine from that gloss I previously applied, but not overly so. When that was dry, it was time to add the missing details. The wheels were added onto the landing gear legs, and the propeller was push-fit onto the nose. Some gunmetal paint would be added onto the engine exhausts, and then I used some dirty down rust to give them a more rusty kind of look, or a burnt kind of metal. You can actually thin this dirty down rust with water to make a light wash, and that's what I did here. When this dries, it should give a more realistic look to these engine exhausts. These were then carefully added into their slots on the nose of the aircraft, and this small clear part, which I believe is a landing light, was glued into the hole on the lower side of the wing. The final step was to remove those masks from the canopy, and with that done, I'm going to call my build of the Trumpeter P-40 in 1/72 scale complete. And there we have it, that's another build under the belt and of one of my favourite topics. I haven't actually done a P40 in this sort of grey-green camouflage scheme, so actually it was nice to do something a little bit different. I have done them in desert schemes and, AVG schemes, and I think I even did one like in a Battle of Britain kind of scheme. So I've done them in those before, but never one like this. So it's nice to add that to my display shelf. This kit is a 2007 tooling, and with that in mind, it does seem to feature the majority of the things that we like to see: recessed panel lines, a few bits of rivets here and there, not a great deal of flash, and the fit was generally quite nice. It was quite a pleasant kit to build. I think some of the areas where this kit is let down a little bit is in the fact it doesn't have a pilot figure, and there is no designed feature to have the landing gear retracted. The only way to have the landing gear displayed is in the lowered position, unless you're willing to make some kind of modification to the kit. Also, whilst you do get 3 decal schemes included, and you get full decal sets, so I will be using the spare ones I've not yet used on other P40s in the future, they were not the best quality decals. They were usable, they were fine, but they were just a little bit papery, a little bit thick. There was a little bit of a tear in one or two here and there. They do go onto the model perfectly fine, but I did have to take a little bit more care with them. Also, the fact that there was that typo on there where it says on step and on lift, you could fix that, but I just decided to omit them, partly because they were wrong, and also because the instructions don't actually tell you where to put those stencils. I think those extra mask sets that I got, they definitely sped up the build. The canopy masks, generally okay, but I did have that problem with the one on the windscreen not really being right for the variant I was doing. And the AML vinyl masks, although they're great to have as well, in places you do have to add extra bits of tape or add the bits to stick it down properly, because sometimes they don't quite conform. But I definitely do enjoy using these products because it just makes life a little bit easier. On the whole, I really enjoyed building this kit. I probably would consider building another one in the future. If I had to do a quick mental comparison to the Airfix one, because the Airfix one is very similar, I think maybe this one is a little bit more rugged in its design. It's a little bit more forgiving. Things are just a little bit more chunky, but the Airfix one maybe has the slight edge in the number of parts and what your options are, because I think you get a pilot in that one. The Airfix one is ever so slightly more refined, and it does have slightly better quality decals. Also, if you had to come down to it between the two, this one, and I know this isn't technically an RRP, but it was £12.60, and that seems to be about average for where I've looked online. £12.60 is a bit more than the Airfix version as well, so it swings and roundabouts. In this one you're getting some interesting paint schemes, but the Airfix one might be slightly better value. But with that in mind, definitely a kit that I enjoyed and could consider building again in the future. I do keep a note of everything that I do with my builds in my journal. The journal is something that I've created. It's like a workbench helper. You just keep a log of everything that you've done inside of your journal, and if you'd like to keep a log of your own builds, you can buy these on Amazon, and it helps support the channel. So in here it does say that I took 5 days to build this one, so that's pretty good going for me. Some of my observations were that it's a simple kit with a good level of detail and a small amount of flash. However, my frustrating thoughts were that there was no pilot, the vent on the bottom could only be closed, there were no flaps that you could display, and no raised landing gear. And also the fact that the masks had to have a little bit of extra work done to them. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with this one. And on that, I'm going to call this one here. Let me know what you thought of my build and review down in the comments, and any other suggestions for other kits you'd like to see me build in the future. A quick shout out to my Model Club members. A massive thanks to these guys on screen for the extra support they give the channel. If you'd like to join the Model Minutes Model Club and find out about the perks that you can get by becoming a member, check out the links in the description. Alternatively, you could help support the channel in other ways, and again, full information is below the video. If, however, you've enjoyed this one and are new here, make sure you subscribe with notifications turned on so you never miss a modelling upload. Finally though, last thing to say is a massive thank you to you for watching this one, and I'll see you on the workbench again next time. Alright, what am I doing? P40, that one there. Oh, I dropped it. I think on Okay. Trumpeter P40. Take one, hopefully the only take. Alright, cool. And as a small note, if you'd like to get your hands on a brush. And as a small note, and